Well, Paul, you mentioned about training dogs and being a part of that, particularly, I would say, since I've known you with Lorraine Sams, who was an absolute genius with the Greyhound, a fantastic trainer, and many, many good times, some of which we'll touch on here. But I'm really interested to know, when your partner trains Greyhounds, and in her case, very often top class Greyhounds, surely that gives you a massive edge when it comes to punting.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. No, I don't really think so, Julie. I think you kind of, you could. I think when you're a punter, you've got to take away the emotional side of it completely. And although you can get drawn into having a little interest bet, and again, part and parcel of gambling, I think, is staking, working out, price versus probability, and I think that sometimes, I think it's renowned that trainers can be the worst tipsters in the world. And the only one thing I would say is with Lorraine, there was no stone left unturned. That dog got the best of everything.
What about from a sort of, knowing your dog point of view? I've heard kennel hands talk about stories where, they would go to get a dog out of the kennel on a particular day. Some days they'd come out bouncing, and other days they'd just come out normally. And they would know what days that dog is going to win, because of its, we all wake up feeling good and bad some days. Was that helpful?
Yeah, but like I always say, you've still got to put them in the traps. And again, another part of gambling is trap draws, Julie. That they are key. Obviously, I did the thing last year on Derby Lanes, and that's something again that was been instilled into me. I know two lads, Paul and Alan Richardson. We call Paul Podge. Known him years and years and years since sort of 2001, 2002, since I started gambling. And they were the lads that I met on those steps, probably 1981. That I didn't really realise who they were and what they were all about at the time. But Podge in particular has taught me about the lanes and the lines that dogs run to the turn, and that's something that when I was at Crayford, that is something that I always did. I always would pride myself on putting dogs in the right boxes, and I used to make notes for the race card. Obviously, there's a lot of sort of mention recently about race card comments and stuff like that. And one of the lads that used to write the grading cards, that obviously you get the official results, but when you grade, you have a grading card. And there was always a man that used to come in on race nights and race days to fill in the grading cards. And if he got a bit too descriptive, he'd be throwing his pen down and getting a little bit irate. But that's something that I took great pride in, is being descriptive, and to make sure that when I graded that dog, I put that dog in the right box. There's no way that I was ever going to put in a dog in a wrong box to make it a competitive race, if you like. Just wasn't going to happen. And I think that's something that you have to be aware of when you're a gambler. But going back to the part of training, I think that all you can do really is make sure that dog is 100%. And Lorraine was great at doing that, and her father as well. He fed the dogs to perfection, and between them, that it was a joy to just watch them change a dog's diet, change the amount that a dog was fed. And of course, I was just part and parcel to that. I just basically, when Lorraine was training, I just did as I was told. We used to treat dogs, used to use Ron Mills and George Drake, physios, and we used to have a big long list of treating dogs, and that's what we did to get the best out of those dogs. And I could never remember Lorraine taking any chance with a dog that was only even partly sound, and her dogs would always go in there 100%.
And she certainly got her just rewards. You guys had some fantastic times with some brilliant greyhounds. I think my favourite memory from your kennel was obviously Spiridon Louis winning the St Leger, but not just winning the St Leger. Me being me, obviously, particularly remember him coming up to the bar at Wimbledon Dog Track afterwards. That was one of my favourite memories in greyhound racing. I
always say, I think to be a dog trainer, you need to be a bit cranky as well. And Lorraine's definitely that bit of a Fruit Loop in that. But she loved the dog so much, and the partnership she had with Gail was quite quite special. And you mentioned about the Ledger. He'd already won the Regency that year. He'd already won the TV trophy. And for me, once we'd won the TV trophy, he was an 8-bend dog. He could really just dominate the eight bend scene. But she actually bought Spiridon Louis because she wanted to win the Ledger. I mean, that was when he was a pup, and obviously it never, or hardly ever, works out, but it did in this case. But I remember we were in the dog kitchen. We used to have quite a few conversations in the kitchen, and Gail was talking about going for the Ledger, and I looked at her and I said, "Are you mad?" I said, "Go for the Ledger. He's got to go for 10 bends," and that was a bit of a joke, because I went home and I looked at the racing post, I looked at the betting, and I thought, well, he can beat that, he can beat that, he can beat that. I thought, well, maybe it's not a bad idea, and of course the rest was history. But yeah, they were brilliant times. Even leading up, when you talk about stories and the way that you say about trainers and their opinions, Spiridon Louis had a catalogue of errors throughout. It was a 4-round competition in those days. He went from getting a bee sting between, I think, round 1 and 2. He went off colour between round 2 and 3. And in the semi-finals, he dropped back and he ran a weird race, a strange race. And he looked out and somehow he dropped his head down on the line and came third. And when he came back, he was on 3 legs. I get emotional talking about it now. And Lorraine went, he won't run in the final. And she worked on him and treated him and got him into the final. Of course, before the final, everyone thought, well, he can't win the final on that semi-final performance. So you say about having a little bit of an edge. That was an edge that night, because I was stood on the steps at Wimbledon and his price just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was betting on Betfair and I just kept pressing buttons all night. And I didn't even know how much I'd won until I got home. And it was quite a substantial amount. And I cheered him home like I had a remote control on him that night. He turned fairly handy, and that's all he had to do was turn handy. I think it was director's chair, and the leader was Lenson Joker. And he came whizzing through, obviously, and those immortal lines from Errol, Louis wins the Ledger. It was just, brilliant. And that night was fantastic.
Yeah, it was
fantastic.
Really
great celebration. I think I ended up with, like me being me, I had a bit of a sham that night. Ended up with his parading jacket on my head, and went to the bar and looked round and kind of bought champagne and bought drinks, and then looked round. Of course, then the Sky transmission had ended, and also looked round and there was Gary Newbon and Hobbsy and the rest of Lenny Ponder, and it kind of got the bill got a little bit. I think that was the biggest bar bill I've ever had, but it was worth it, and it was quite a pleasant surprise when I got home and saw my Betfair account.
Excellent. Around that time you met Lorraine, you were punting at Romford. You were also trying to forge a career in the media in greyhound racing, and Lorraine was really supportive, both the punting and the broadcasting. How important is it, particularly on the gambling side, to have someone alongside you who is supportive of it?
Oh, massively. Massively. And that is the one thing about Lorraine. She doesn't really bet herself particularly, but she understands it. And yeah, no, it was massive, because when I kind of got into that, where I really needed to move on in my career, and I was looking at moving to Ireland, all sorts of different things, and that when that advert came up for the broadcasting with Go Barking Mad, I thought, well, that's me. This was designed for me. And I was really lucky, because I went for the screen test, and I did my screen test with Ozzy Osman, who'd done all the live TV stuff at Walthamstow and things like that. So it was almost like he took me under his wing, and he said, if you don't get the job, after we did it, he said, if you don't get the job, it'd be a travesty. He said, you were brilliant, which was a great, sort of encouragement for me. And the reason I went for it was because Paul Jacobs used to be the track commentator at Crayford, and every now and again he got into a bit of regularity of being a bit late. So I used to commentate. I just commentated on the first race, and I quite enjoyed it. And people said, well, you weren't too bad, and that kind of gives you that encouragement. And Lorraine was a big advocate of me when I did outside broadcast for Go Barky Mad and stuff like that. And yeah, that it was good. And even then, as I said to you, in that 2001 when I started there, and started going to Romford, and Graham Blomfield said to me, you know, get the videos and start professional punting. I thought, because I've always made it hard for punters. I was only a casual punter on the horses, basically. And as I say, if we had a night out at Romford, it was just, you know, a casual thing for me. But Lorraine was very good at getting me out of maybe a bad run, which I think you need people to understand that you can't win. You can't win all the time. You know, defy anybody. I know a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, win every month." I don't win every month. At the end of the year, since I've been doing it 20 years now, I will always win at the end of the year. But I go on some horrendous runs, and she's always there to get you focused, to get you going back. What we say, go granite. You know, go really stricto. Whereas you can get a bit carried away when you're punting and try and do too much. She really helps me focus, and she's done that on a number of occasions. Obviously, I've done it 20 years now.
There's a number of challenges to overcome when you're professional punting. I think dealing with losing runs is one of them. Another one was that when you were punting at Romford, in the end, you found it difficult to get on at Romford. And so you changed your way of doing things, brought more technology in, I think it's fair to say. And around that time, you also met Gary Noble.
Yeah. I remember actually I was in the studios at Ladbrokes, because I was freelance broadcasting then, doing a lot for Go Barky Mad and doing work for Ladbrokes in their voiceover studios in Harrow. And I just thought, when we were going to Romford and again, you know, going on bad runs, maybe it was in the middle of that where things weren't going that great. And I'm just thinking, this isn't working. And then, like you say, hard to get on. And I suppose the bookmakers there at Romford, in the end, they're not going to keep taking your bets. I contacted Jerry Croxford. You know, Jerry's done a Star Sports betting people interview himself, and Jerry said, "Yeah, we've got a video watching system." He said, and it's instant videos. He said, and it's easy to watch that and then watch the pictures. You know, so we kind of got introduced then, or he introduced me to Gary, and Gary had set up this video watching system. It's amazing. It's changed the way, you know, instead of watching videos and making notes and all that sort of thing on the old-fashioned way of doing it, it kind of revolutionised the way I was then punting, and again gave me a bit of resurgence. And then it was like almost like a co-op of guys together in an office wanting to do the same thing and knocking around ideas. And again, that was something that I did with Alan Richardson at Romford to a great success in those early days. And then, you know, kind of did it again with a different group of lads and a different track.
So Gary Noble was quite a big influence on you, changed the way you did things.
Yeah, I mean, Gary's one of those lads that he's just steeped in history with greyhounds, punting. He's been a bookmaker, he's been an owner, he's been a punter, and you know, a guy that I've got a lot of respect for. And again, you learn stuff from other people. I think, you know, I'm 58 years old now, Julie, and I still do not stop learning. I think you've got to have the ability to listen to people. And again, it doesn't matter how old. People with experience are great, but again, more recently, I bumped into some younger lads as well. When Lorraine had her Go With Florence, we've still got her indoors now. She started training back again, and under an owner trainer's license. We went to Perry Bar. I met a guy called Dan Ashton there, and I knew instantly he knew what he was doing. And you can learn. And I sort of switched to Perry Bar and stuff like that. And there's lots of young guys. You know, you see people like David Mitchell within the industry, young Tom Mumford. Tom was in the office with Gary. You can learn so much. It doesn't necessarily have to be an experienced person. It can be an enthusiastic person. I think that's what, when you're in the greyhound racing, I think that is what grabs you, is the enthusiasm and the community spirit that you get within the sport.